Welcome to GeekWire HQ2. Hey everybody, it's Todd Bishop here with John Cook and Taylor Soper. We are in Pittsburgh, baby.
Loving it, loving it.
Absolutely. So for those of you who have not been following along with this fun adventure of ours, we are spending an entire month in Pittsburgh, the GeekWire news team. Taylor, John, and I are just the first wave of news reporters and editors here in Pittsburgh. We're going to be exploring the innovation economy here, the resurgence of Pittsburgh, and also assessing this city's chances for landing Amazon HQ2.
Yeah, and I mean, first off, we got to talk about our HQ2 digs here ourselves. We're at Beauty Shop Co-working. This is an amazing space in the Lawrenceville neighborhood. I love our office space set up here. This is kind of a co-working residential combo. We've got our unit upstairs, great office space. I mean, frankly, it's a little bit better than HQ1 in Seattle, isn't it? It's pretty sweet.
It kind of is. It certainly raises the bar for future GeekWire office space. So we are having a great time, and Taylor is going to be here for the duration, for the entire month, and then other GeekWire reporters will be cycling through. Kurt Schlosser, Nat Levy, Monica Nicholsberg will be cycling through for the month. But again, a big thanks to Beauty Shop here, the co-working facility, and also to our sponsors, DQE, and to K&L Gates for making this possible. So we spent the day exploring Pittsburgh, and we have some pretty strong impressions of this city. I've been here once before, but you're both entirely new to the city. So Taylor, first off, first impressions of Pittsburgh, it was a beautiful sunny day.
Yeah, it's a beautiful city. That's kind of my first impression. The geography of this place is very unique. There's rivers that meet. There's, I think, over 300 or 400 bridges here that we crossed, and there's many different neighborhoods that have their own unique character and flavor, and it was really fun kind of getting a first taste of that, and also meeting and speaking to a lot of longtime residents here about what life is like and also what they think of Amazon potentially coming into their city.
That's right. One of the things we made sure to do was to go to a diverse set of neighborhoods, everywhere from the Hill District to Lawrenceville, all the way over to a bunch of other different parts, including some of the sites that have been rumored to be in the running for Amazon HQ2 as part of Pittsburgh's proposal to the tech company. John, what were your impressions?
Similar to Taylor, I mean, I was really struck by the beauty of the place. I mean, it is a fantastic viewpoint. I mean, we went up to the top of Mount Washington. I know we had a unseasonably warm, sunny day here in Pittsburgh, but it's a gorgeous city, and it's so defined by its geography with the rivers and the hills and the foliage. It's just a gorgeous city. I mean, I guess you think about Seattle, where we're based, in terms of the Cascades and Mount Rainier and the Olympics and the water with Puget Sound. I think we're really lucky to live in such a beautiful place, and these viewpoints are really gorgeous here as well in Pittsburgh. So I was first off struck by that as well. The other thing that really struck me here was, I guess it ties into the geography to some degree, was in part because of those bridges. In fact, I think there are 467 bridges from what we were told on our tour today. They also, to some degree, each neighborhood is pretty geographically diverse and almost set apart from one another. Like, you can get into little nooks and crannies of this city that are really different. And in fact, the bridges sometimes cut off neighborhoods. Our tour guides were saying there are people that live in Pittsburgh that have never even been to a neighborhood that's even 10 minutes away from them. And that really struck me as well.
So these are things, obviously, that longtime Pittsburgh residents will not be surprised by. And obviously, as newcomers, we are discovering this city for the first time. But I think we also bring a valuable perspective to this city, not only because we cover the tech industry in a larger tech market, and so we're going to be able to assess the overall level of innovation and startups and venture capital and everything else in Pittsburgh over the next month with a fresh eye, frankly, that people who are here wouldn't necessarily have. But also, we have experienced and witnessed firsthand the impact and the scope of Amazon's growth, which, if it were to come to Pittsburgh, would be transformative.
Yeah, and in part because we're talking about a smaller base. I mean, there are 300,000 people that live in Pittsburgh proper, and so that's about half the size of Seattle. And so it is a much smaller town, a much smaller city, and you could feel that even with a lot of our tour guides today. I mean, as they got talking, they had all these connections that they found out about. One of our favorite moments of the day, I think, was when Ilan Mizrahi, our photographer, we were driving into East Liberty and looked over, and there was a guy in his red convertible with the top down, and it was 49 degrees, and yelled out and said, "Hey," and it was an old buddy, old friend of his. And so there is a bit of a small town connectedness to this place, which is great and makes you feel really at home and has kind of that kind of Midwestern ethos, which is awesome. And of course, as a child of Ohio, I really love that aspect of this place. The thing that I think where it's a little bit maybe of a challenge for Pittsburgh is because of it being a smaller base. I mean, when you're talking about 50,000 jobs potentially coming into a place, I mean, that is a radical upheaval of the society here in many ways, and the culture, and like, could Pittsburgh actually consume that and handle it? And so one of the things we've been talking a lot about here is just the capacity here. And while I think there is the capacity, because there's a lot of land, there's a lot of housing stock, there's a lot of infrastructure, I think, to support Amazon being here physically, you got to wonder about culturally and the society, would the society be able to consume that? And I think that's the big challenge in front of Pittsburgh.
Yeah, one of the things that's been remarkable has been the restaurant culture here, and I think you look at the symphony and the ballet and all of the restaurants, a lot of the fascinating nooks and crannies that you're talking about, it certainly would be a worthy city for Amazon culturally. That said, we were going by a couple of the sites. One of the sites that was pointed to as a possible Amazon HQ2 location was essentially less than 30 acres, and the comment that we heard was, well, you could build up. But just to give folks some context, Amazon's core South Lake Union campus in Seattle started with about 50 acres that were assembled by Paul Allen's Vulcan Inc., the Microsoft co-founder, and the notion of Amazon bringing 50,000 people here when they only have about 40,000 in Seattle across South Lake Union and the Denny Triangle. I'm giving you a little bit of inside Seattle neighborhood language there, but I mean, it is, some of the sites that they're talking about here for Amazon are just too small. Now, one of them is clearly not.
Yeah, this is the Hazelwood Green project, which is a old abandoned steel mill. I think it was 170 acres or more. Beautiful spot along the river. It's being redeveloped. Carnegie Mellon's setting up a facility there. Uber has a test track. It sits a bit far outside of downtown. I'd say it's maybe 5 to 10 minutes outside of the core downtown, but an amazing potential piece of land that you actually probably don't see in other cities. Like, you can't I can't really imagine that type of land being available on a pristine riverbank in Boston or DC or New York, some of the other cities that are contending. And so to some degree, Pittsburgh has an advantage there in terms of having some pretty developable land pretty close into the city.
Yeah, and physically, as we talk about infrastructure and buildings and space, it seems that Pittsburgh may be poised and ready for Amazon, but also it's interesting to hear from the people here, are they ready for Amazon? And from the folks that we've talked to, especially the long-term Pittsburghers, I get the feeling that I think they would welcome an Amazon, whether it's bringing more jobs here. There is concern about the taxes and how much a company like Amazon might get and what a company like Amazon would do to the, pushing out folks with housing or what have you. But I got the vibe that I think there's a very open mind here about what a company like Amazon could do for Pittsburgh's economy. It
was fascinating to me that in some of the more affluent neighborhoods, there was actually a lot more skepticism about Amazon coming in, whereas some of the areas that are struggling in a socioeconomic way were essentially very much welcoming of it, when in fact, if the housing prices and everything else goes up and all of these things impact them, I mean, they could be in a position to be much more severely impacted. That was one of the things that struck me, and we know that from Seattle. I mean, there is a housing rental crunch, and that impacts people in those levels of economic status. So it's interesting, and I do think that we bring a different perspective, and we're going to be hopefully providing that kind of insight and context from our experience in Seattle as we cover Pittsburgh over the next month. We got a lot to talk about. We're not just going to be talking about Amazon HQ2 and the potential for that, but we're going to be delving into the robotics scene here. Taylor has a lot of self-driving cars stories set up.
Which we saw on the road today. We saw a few of the self-driving Ubers buzzing around town, which was really fascinating to see.
Yeah, absolutely. Lots to cover here, news to cover, and we're going to have some scoops along the way covering the tech scene in Pittsburgh, just as we've covered in Seattle for the past 7 years or more, if you go back to pre-GeekWire days. All right, so you can check out all of our coverage at geekwire.com. Just go to geekwire.com/HQ2. Until next time, I'm Todd Bishop.
I'm Taylor Soper.
And I'm John Cook.
We'll talk to you next time from GeekWire HQ2.